father figure. Native Wild 2017.
Thank you for tuning in to Out of the Wild, the Angsty Dad in America podcast. I, as usual, am your Angsty Dad, Earl, and welcome back to our first episode after Proud, where we're back to our standard format where I do a monologue and we have a guest. And today's guest is Mike Jenkins, artist and adventurer, old friend of mine, good friend of mine. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, gentrification, his adventures in California, Alaska, Savannah, Georgia, and just all kinds of different things. If you haven't had a chance to, please check out Proud. I'm very proud of it. Ching. It's a brief history of LGBTQ plus fight for rights and equality in this country. I thought it turned out pretty good, so hopefully you'll take some time to give it a listen. I'm going to be pretty brief today on the monologue. Mike and I talked for a long time, so I want everyone to get an opportunity to listen to the interview. But today, I just want to talk about a couple of things. It's actually September 11th, 2018, and I want to talk about that for a second. 9/11. I remember where I was 9/11. I'm sure anyone who was alive then does. It was actually my first day of school, 9th grade, or I've been 10th grade. Maybe it was 10th grade. I went to Rocky Point High School. It was my first day of school at Rocky Point High School on Long Island. And I remember walking down the hallways and seeing people standing outside and on televisions. I was like, what's going on here? Parents hurrying and getting their kids. It was like, 9-something in the morning, and I walked into math, and which was already third period because I guess the day started at 7:30 or so, second period maybe. And the math teacher said, "Hey, had you heard what happened?" I was like, "No, what?" He's like, "Two planes hit the World Trade Center." I was like, "No way!" At first, I thought it was a joke, like one of those Howard Stern things at the time. But no, it wasn't a joke. And then I thought it was an accident. And then the second one hit, and then quickly realized that we had been attacked. 9/11 was an interesting time. It was kind of the turning point. I think history kind of shifted gears we had lived so well for so long. Obviously, there's a direct line from 9/11 to what's going on now. Resentment toward Muslims. It's like people tend to think that Muslims have always been considered the bad guy. And while you could go back and see, obviously, popular depictions of the demonization of Muslims, the term terrorist in the 90s was associated with someone in the IRA. If you said terrorist in the United States, someone would think IRA, not Muslim. So, the two obviously don't go hand in hand, but 9/11, that changed. I remember there was a 7-Eleven on Long Island, not too far from my school. I believe someone threw a brick through the window because the owner was a Muslim, or they thought he was. My mom worked with a girl who was from Trinidad, maybe? And someone thought that she wasn't a Muslim. She just, had similar features to what I guess they determined a Muslim looked like. And she was beaten. That happened. But also after 9/11, there was a lot of unity. There was a lot of coming together. There was a lot of camaraderie, and that was a beautiful thing. But 9/11 ultimately was what launched us into the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and the never-ending cycle of war that we've been involved in. Thousands and thousands of people lost their lives. First responders were running in when everyone was running out, and buildings were collapsing. Obviously, being from New York, we knew we had family that was stranded down there. I have friends who lost family down there. It was a crazy time, and I think obviously we all felt it. But when you were in New York, it was different. I remember just a few days after. So that summer before, we had been staying upstate New York. We lived in Long Island. We were staying upstate New York with some family. And my mom and I think my youngest brother, Miles, who's been on this show, shout out Animal Hotel. I think it was the three of us. I know my mom and I don't remember if Miles was there. And I'm not sure if my other brother was there either, Justin. But we were, I do remember we went up to get stuff from upstate New York, where my family was, the stuff that the rest of our things from staying there that summer. And the sky was blue upstate, and the sky was blue on Long Island. But when you drove through the city, it was like this brownish, yellowish, grayish color. And it was just disgusting, and it felt different. New York was locked down for a while. After that, there were all these concerts and celebrations and benefits and everything. But 9/11, we like I said, we're still feeling the effects of 9/11 to this day. And on this day, on 9/11, and I hate to even have to go here, but just to show you the difference just to show you a difference. Former President, my hero, Barack Obama tweeted, "We will always remember everyone we lost on 9/11. Thank the first responders who keep us safe and honor all those who defend our country and the ideals that bind us together." And do the Obama voice. "There's nothing our resilience and resolve can't overcome, and no act of terror that can ever change who we are." So Barack tweeted that eloquent, 240 characters or less statement, very presidential and to the point. Donald Trump, also to the point, I guess, tweeted, 17 years to September 11th. That was it. 17 years. 17 years. I'm president. In case you didn't know. And as I say, there is a direct line that can be drawn from 9/11 to the moment that we're living in today. The anxiety against Muslims, our position in the world in terms of, especially the Middle East. We have a constant presence in the Middle East, the never-ending war in Afghanistan. It's interesting. It's interesting to look at that in hindsight, so many years now removed, and see the long, a decade plus of the effects after 9/11. So on this day, I guess this day is tough for me, again, being a New Yorker, being an American in general, but especially being a New Yorker and just being down. I remember leaving school. They took my brother out of school, my parents did, and I left school at a normal time. When we got back to the house, and we were all just around the TV watching CNN and just showed the footage over and over and over and over again. And Tom Clancy on doing, opinion. So that was crazy. So I guess, again, being from New York, being a New Yorker, being an American citizen, 9/11 holds special weight to me. It means a lot of things. Again, you can kind of look back and see how we got to where we are if you use 9/11 as a starting point. The other thing I want to I want to say, God bless all those first responders, like the president said, the former president said. God bless all those first responders, and the people who lost family and friends on that day. Like I said, I knew some folks who lost family and friends. We had some family that were stranded down and that we didn't heard from for a while, a couple of days, and we finally did. But that was again, 9/11 has a special spot in my heart for a number of reasons, and I hope that we kind of continue to hold this day in reverence. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is, as many of you may know, we're in the Carolinas, and we are on the course, or on track to be hit by a huge Hurricane Florence. It's apparently picking up strength. It's a slow-moving hurricane, which is going to erase us. It's a slow-moving eraser over the Carolinas, and we are directly in its path. Now, the only reason I'm mentioning this is because, this is a once-in-a-generation hurricane. It doesn't happen very often. But it's perpetuated by the Earth heating up. The oceans getting warmer are making these bigger, badder hurricanes. And if you think about it, there's going to be the Carolinas, but New York, Miami, Houston, you can go on, Midwest, all these places in the United States being battered by weather, and now the Carolinas, it's our turn. So as I'm giving you this show, as I'm delivering this show on September the 11th, 2018, in a couple of days, we're expected to be hit with one of the biggest hurricanes ever, I guess. So pray for us. Again, just keep that in mind. This is one of those things these things keep happening because we're not doing enough to do our part to change, to prevent the Earth from heating up, to prevent climate change. We have these disasters in America, especially. When I was in Ireland, they used to joke about how America. It was kind of a dark joke, but would comment at least on how America. We get all kinds of weather here. This doesn't happen all around the world. Occasionally you'll hear about a monsoon somewhere, but we're constantly being battered with weather and heat and snow and America is a song of fire and ice, and it doesn't help that we're constantly polluting our oceans. I mean, these are things that we all know. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but these are important things to continue to say. We have to be conscious of these things. We have to reduce our carbon footprint, because if we don't, we're going to have more situations. We're going to have every year these hurricanes are getting worse and worse, just like every year it's getting hotter and hotter. We're losing animals. We're losing ice caps. We're losing. We're destroying this planet, and it's going to destroy us in return. So that's all I got today. Told you I'd keep it brief. Up next is my boy Mike Jenkins, very good friend of mine. We talk about a lot of stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy. Stick around. And we out the wild one. Thank you for tuning in. It's Earl, your angsty dad. This is the Out of the Wild Angsty Dad in America podcast. And today I have my very special friend, old friend of mine, Mike Jenkins on the show. Artist, adventurer, recently got back from Alaska. Say hello to the people, Michael.
How's it going, everybody?
I think they're all doing well, hopefully. Hope no one's listening to this under duress. That would be terrible.
Sometimes I seek podcasts for solace.
Well, yeah, I can see that. I do too. So, welcome back to North Carolina.
Thank you.
Your native home. You are a Charlotte native?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you've lived here.
My first 17 years.
Okay, and then recently you just came back from Alaska. What were you doing in Alaska?
I'm a commercial salmon fisherman. 4 months out of the year, I live and work on a boat in Alaska.
That is insane.
Yep.
What's that like?
It's quite an adventure.
I can only imagine. Yeah. I mean, tell us about it.
Well,
so, like, what's your day like?
So I live on the boat Summer Bay. Some of you guys might know it from the show Deadliest Catch.
Okay.
It is on that show.
Okay.
But that's for crab season.
Okay.
For salmon season, it's a 120-foot boat. I'm the cook and deckhand. There are 4 of us on the boat, including myself: captain, engineer, cook, and then just a deckhand.
Mm-hmm.
And the daily life is you work like 20 hours a day. We take on about 300,000 pounds of salmon every time we deliver.
Jeez.
And yeah, it's a really interesting life.
So what's like one of the craziest or most interesting things and this is not your first time doing this?
No, this is my third season, so 3 years.
Third season, so even if and out of those 3 years, like, what are some of the most interesting things you've seen out there? I can only imagine what that's like.
I think the wildlife is definitely the most interesting thing.
Right.
So, like, you wake up in the morning, you make your cup of coffee, you go out on deck, and you start working, and, like, you look off in the distance, and you just see a pod of whales casually doing their thing.
Yeah.
You see just, like, a big whale tail go up. Maybe you see a pod of killer whales go by, and they're feeding because, like, fish are around us. We're in the same part of the water.
Yeah, y'all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, honestly, we're competitors.
All right.
Bald eagles swoop down. You see a bear on the shore.
Wow.
Like, the wildlife is really incredible. And, like, one of my fondest memories is being on watch when we were running back to the cannery to deliver. In watches, I'm in the wheelhouse by myself while everyone else sleeps, and I drive the boat. And one of the very few dark times, because it's only dark 2 or 3 hours a day.
Right, Alaska.
Yeah, that far north. One of the few times that it was actually dark, I went out on the back deck to relieve myself, use the bathroom.
Right.
And I looked behind us, and in our wake, we had stirred up all these bioluminescent jellyfish.
Oh, wow.
So, like, a quarter mile behind us in, like, this kind of lazy S pattern was just all of this bright green, blue, and purple jellyfish. It honestly felt like I was, like, in a Disney movie, like Pocahontas painting with the colors of the wind.
Right. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's really stunning. It's, like, breathtaking.
That is incredible. So there's only four you guys on this boat?
4 of us on the boat.
For 4 months?
4 months.
Your mom came out there. I saw your...
Yeah, so this year I actually did herring season as well. Okay. And herring is mostly just used for bait for crabbing and long lining, which are other types of fishing for other types of fish. Okay. And actually it's for all pot fishing, which is also cod and a couple other types of fish.
Was it pot fishing?
Pot fishing. It's where you use a pot, which is a big metal cage, typically 7 feet by 7 feet. Okay.
I'm not going to lie to you. Usually we don't talk this much about fishing on this show.
Yeah, right? It's kind of surprising.
This is new. Learn something. See, this is why you listen in, guys. You learn something new every day.
So I did herring season, which was really interesting and very different.
Yeah.
And that was the first month, which was April. And then we went back from Togiak, Alaska, which was where we did herring season. We went from Togiak to Homer, and we went to the port in Homer, and I did 2 weeks of shipyard. And 2 weeks of shipyard work is just, you're fixing up the boat. You're fixing any problems. Like, we had an exhaust leak, so we fixed our exhaust leak. I did something called needle gunning, which is a giant tattoo gun, basically, that you find rust on the boat, and you just sit there all day with a needle gun and just take the rust off the metal, and then you prime over it.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's really not fun.
That sounds so your mom came out while you were doing this?
Yeah, so during shipyard, my mom came out. because I was going to be out there for 4 more months after that. And so our boss was like, take a break, like, have fun. And I was like, cool, my mom's going to come visit. And he was like, perfect.
That's awesome.
So my mom came, and it was actually the most time on shore I've ever spent in Alaska in the 3 years.
That's
because I'm on the boat the whole time.
So I was going to ask you, so what's that like the seclusion part of it? There's only you and 3 other guys, and you're on a freaking boat in the middle of the Arctic wilderness, essentially.
Yeah.
Oceanic wilderness, at least.
You have to be the right kind of person.
Yeah, I would think so.
I read 16 books this summer.
That's awesome.
So you have to be that kind of person.
Yeah.
Somebody who can entertain your brain.
Recommend one for us.
Oh my god. Well, I reread one of my favorites, a classic, The Master and Margarita.
The Master and Margarita?
It's a famous Russian book. It's about the devil.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
It's very entertaining.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Books about the devil usually are.
I also read Cavalier and Clay for the first time.
Okay.
The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Never even heard of it.
Fantastic book about, true story, about 2 very underappreciated forefathers of comic books.
Oh, okay.
They started in the very pulpy genre of comic books, and in doing so, created a whole language that still exists today, but they don't really get a lot of credit.
That's pretty dope. Let me ask you this: being out in Alaska, what you were like? Those of us who live here on the mainland, we've been barraged with all things.
As they call it in Alaska, the lower 48.
Yeah, the lower 48. Those of us down here, we've been barraged with just everything having to do with Trump over the time that you've been gone. The whole summer has been Trump summer.
Oh yeah.
What's it like? 2 things. What's it like kind of watching your home from a distance? And what's it like not being a part of that barrage and coming back and it just being ever present?
So to be honest, we aren't even watching it from a distance.
Yeah.
We're completely cut off and blissfully unaware.
That's awesome.
I don't know how blissful, actually, because we all would talk about it and we'd be like, man, we could go to war and we wouldn't even know. Like,
it sounds like the premise for a story.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, we joke all the time about the Russians invading and we're the front line.
Yeah. But you could probably see it from your boat.
Oh.
I could see Russia from my boat.
Almost.
Right.
I mean, a lot of crabbers back in the day used to illegally fish Russian.
I can see that.
They used to illegally go all the way over to Russian waters and fish crab.
I can see that. I can
that was before it was super regulated.
Well, so like I guess,
but it's. I think the best way to describe it is, I really don't know. Blissfully unaware doesn't quite cut it.
Yeah.
Because there is always this level of like nervousness in the back of your mind about coming back.
Did you feel that in the last few? Every time you've gone, have you felt that way?
So last year was even more weird because I left during the election.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to say I was in Ireland. I went to Ireland in January of he got 16, I guess it was.
Yeah. Oh, so it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was during the election.
Yeah. So I went to Ireland in January of 16, and he got inaugurated January 20th, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And so from the time, so I was in DC for all of December, then I was in Ireland from January to the middle of March, and watching our country from another country like that, like especially during these kind of crazy times, like to see this man go to inaugurate, it was insane. And watching the way that other parts of the world comment on it, but you didn't even have that.
No.
Did you guys have any news, like radio, anything?
So we have radio, but like it's not used for that. Nobody really keeps up with it.
Yeah.
Occasionally we get like a newspaper off of another boat that delivers groceries and things to us from the cannery. So occasionally we hear things.
That is insane.
I'm sure we would hear a massive...
Right.
Like if there was something really that we needed to hear, we would find out.
Right.
Because we have satellite phones and stuff like that. But satellite phones are $7 a minute, so you don't use them.
Right. Well, and that's another crazy thing, too. Moving on from you living in Alaska, but to our current political situation, if you think about it, as crazy as things are, right? Nothing too crazy has happened yet. Like, we haven't had a major anything
that we really know
that
about.
we know of. But I'm saying that, even that, like a major catastrophe that we know of.
I'm a firm believer that all of these sensationalized events are just distractions.
Oh,
from Nike to Elon Musk to anything that the news is really propagating as a social problem,
right,
is a distraction.
Are you saying that with regards to like we consider like police brutality a social problem. Are you clumping that into that?
Yeah, like things like that. Like,
you think that police brutality is a distraction, though?
No. I think that these things are distracting from those types
actual
of
problem.
things.
I see what you're saying.
Because like police brutality, how much have we talked about that? That's kind of fizzled out, sadly.
Well,
I mean, sadly, it hasn't fizzled out the action of it, but the social unrest is for some reason being shifted to things like Nike.
Yeah,
like,
well, and I think I
which
can see
is
what
a
you're
part of it. It is a part of it because Colin Kaepernick is a representative of
that movement,
a minority, and a people that feel underrepresented and don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah,
they don't know how to speak about it.
Yeah,
and
well,
he
there's
didn't
lots
even
of
try
groups.
to
There's
speak.
Black
He tried
Lives
to
Matter.
not speak.
There's right, and they had a problem with that. So that actually leads me to another point. A couple of weeks ago, I did a segment called "What Is American," talking about how there's different. We're told that the kneeling is a perfect example of what's considered un-American.
Yeah,
and then if that's the case, obviously you have to have something to juxtapose it against. You have to have something to compare it to determine what American is and what is that thing, and like who gets to afford it. So from your or who gets to define it, and from your you also spent a lot of time in Savannah. You were at SCAD, right?
Yeah, I mean, so like brief history of my American experience. I grew up in North Carolina in a fairly rural area, Huntersville, North Carolina, suburb of Charlotte, basically.
Shout out Huntersville, H-Town.
Yeah. So I grew up there, and then I left North Carolina for art school, Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. Then I lived there for 4 years, and then from Savannah, my next place of residence, even though there was some traveling in between, was Los Angeles, California, where I lived for 3 years. And now I'm back in North Carolina. And for me, so I've had a large spectrum of America.
So that's why I wanted to ask you that. So what does first of all, what does America look like to you? Like, how do you define it, and what do you think about the people who try to define it for others? And then, two, what does North Carolina specifically look like to you as a native son who's gone and come back?
So, lots of questions. I think that America is actually undefinable.
Yeah,
I think attempting to define it is actually the biggest problem we have right now. People are so set on America being the way they see it, when really you're defining your immediate surroundings.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
America is so large, so vast, and so populated that like you can't begin to imagine the struggles and the joys and the daily routines that other people that are your fellow citizens go through.
Yeah.
And I really learned that in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I had my intro to that in Savannah in college, but I was also not an emotionally adept human at that point.
Right.
I was lacking
a beast, a monster of some sort.
I was lacking most empathy, probably.
Right.
It was a horribly selfish human
as college usually is.
Yeah, that just wanted to party and
Yeah.
make good grades, kind of, sometimes,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
And have fun.
Yeah.
Like, that was my largest priority. But then, as I was approaching the end of my Savannah experience, I realized how diverse the people around me were, and the types of things that they were going through as approaching the real world after graduating school. And I realized that, wow, I am very privileged. I am very lucky. I have a lot going for me, and I'm very fortunate to not be faced with those social struggles.
Right.
Because as going to art school, a lot of my classmates were not so lucky. They were openly homosexual and discriminated out because of that. They were maybe openly trans. I did have a couple trans friends.
Right.
And they were heavily discriminated in Savannah, Georgia, which is interesting because we have extremely world famous cross-dressers that have been for a very long time. With Lady Chablis.
But see, here's the thing. It's whatever you can compare it to anything. It's best of times was the worst of times.
Yeah.
It's the Dark Knight Rises, which we can talk about shortly because we both love Batman. But it's two different worlds. Like Charlotte's a perfect example of that because on the veneer, when you see, I was watching Charlotte versus the Panthers versus the Cowboys yesterday.
Yeah.
And they kept showing these big wide shots of the stadium and the highway and everything around the stadium. And it looks beautiful. There was a rainbow over it at one point. I don't know if you saw that. It's a beautiful scene. And Charlotte is a beautiful city, don't get me wrong, and everywhere around it. But when you talk about, when people outside of Charlotte, they think of the Bank of America building and the Panthers and the gloss of downtown, maybe the suburbs around, these big beautiful houses and all this stuff. But what they don't ever think about is the fact that Charlotte is one of the worst places for upward mobility. For social advancement, one of the worst. So if you're born in poverty in Charlotte, North Carolina, you're bound to stay in poverty. It's almost certain.
Oh, of course.
And that's what I'm saying. That's the veneer, and you see that all around. It's like you said. Like there's two. We live in. I mean, you can really break America down fundamentally into multiple different countries if you think about it. But we essentially, from top to bottom, we live in two different worlds. Like I agree with you. I realized at some point, like my family's you went to the same high school as my brother. We're from the suburbs. My parents have always had good jobs. We've always been, when we were younger, well taken care of. We come from, I don't like using the word privilege, but we've never really wanted for anything.
We definitely were privileged.
And yeah, I mean, and even if things were bad, we never knew it. Really, not really.
Yeah, the extent of bad for our life was most of my friends had single parents. Mm-hmm. You didn't have a single parent, but they were remarried.
Yeah.
So those were our worldly struggles.
Yeah.
We did all, of course, have financial issues that we were aware of.
Right.
They weren't it wasn't affecting putting food on the table.
Right.
But there were a couple times that maybe we almost couldn't afford rent,
right,
or things like that,
and that changed. I feel like over time, and probably in both of our cases, that changed as we got as my parents had me when they were young, and I think that comes obviously with a number of challenges. But over time, they started figuring it out better, and now they're like, I wish I lived at home now. They have a freaking giant house in Atlanta. I'm like, Mom, what was this? But they had to pay for our expensive asses. So, and I know what that's like too now. That's part of the reason why I'm such an angsty dad. There you go, brought it full circle. But it's two worlds. It's two worlds that we live in, economically, racially, and even being middle class. Firmly middle class is my family's to upper middle class at times, depending the fluctuation of wealth at points. But even being in that stage, being black, still made my experience vastly different from yours.
And
we lived in the same. Like I said, you and my brother graduated.
Even your brother that went to the same high school as me.
At the same time, vastly different experience.
Especially going to a school like North Mac High. Shout out.
Yeah, North Mac. VI.
Going to a school that that's funny. Bringing up Vikings, our mascot 20 years prior to that was a Confederate rebel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they replaced our mascot with the Viking because our school used to be nothing but white country folk.
Right, and then the redistrict.
Entirely.
Yeah.
And then they redistricted it.
Yeah.
We had some nice fun busing where kids were shipped in from over an hour away.
Yeah.
Because they had to redesign the school districts because they were inherently racist.
Right.
And
gerrymandered school districts, essentially, yeah.
And so North Mech was really one of the first schools to have to adjust with that, I think.
And by the time I got to I graduated from North Mech in 2004, and I was only there. I wasn't even there for a full year.
You were only there for a semester.
I was only there, not even a full. I got there in February of when I graduated in 2004. So I got there in February of 2004. So
you graduated in May.
Yeah, so just about a semester. So I didn't. Obviously, Justin and Miles both graduated from North Mech, and you guys did. So I claim it because of that. I lived up there, but I didn't. I was only there first. I was there in my senior year. I didn't give a shit at that point. I was done. You know what I'm saying? But the area is very rural. By the time I got there, though, it was also very diverse. It was predominantly white, then black, then Hispanic. And the thing that I saw here that I didn't see in New York, because we had just moved down here from New York in 2004. When I was in New York, Miles and I the three of us were among very few black kids, right? Now, people think, I thought at least, the North is different from the South. There's racism everywhere. But being the few black kids that we were just integrated. We just hung out with everybody else. There was never any real tension. There were so few of us. But down here, I noticed when I went to North, that wasn't the same, because people hung out with whomever, you and Miles are friends, whatever, and it happens all across the board. I'm not saying that, but in big, you did see self-segregation.
Well, especially at a school of that size.
Yes, and in the cafeteria, I feel like that's what you saw it's like church.
So when for frame of reference, for those that don't know, when I was a freshman, North Mech had 4,200 students.
That's how many people were there when I was there, too.
And so when you have that large of a quantity of children, you really do just get to see what naturally happens. Because, in a smaller school where everyone knows everyone, that doesn't happen as much. Everyone knows each other, everyone has a reputation, everyone interacts.
And that was the other thing about Rocky Point. Rocky Point, there were, I think, 1,000 kids.
Yeah, so, I was still meeting kids that I had gone to school with for 4 years.
Yeah, it's
when I was graduating.
after. Yeah, and
I'm at graduation. Like, who are you?
Yeah, and I've met people. Yeah, even now, graduating 14 years ago, I've met people in the last decade that graduated from. Now it's different because I was only there for a short period of time.
But imagine going
still,
to school with somebody for 4 years
and
every
even
day.
Miles introduced 2 people I think recently who both went to North Mech and didn't know each other, or only knew each other by reputation. They'd never seen each other.
Yeah,
and that's and I think when I graduated, North Mech had the largest graduating class at the time, and
North Mech was the largest. I think the second or first largest high school in the United States at one point.
Oh, really?
I believe
I didn't know that, but it's interesting.
But for sure on the East Coast.
So that diversity, though, and all these kids, and now some of them were bussed in, but all these kids most of them live in the same areas, and again, you just see it. You see it in the school, you see it in the neighborhoods that they live in, and I feel like you see it a lot more in the South than you do in the North. At least I can't compare it to anywhere else, but definitely, because like I said, in New York, it was just like everyone was just kind of whatever. There were so few of us.
Well, there's like the space to self-segregate in the South.
That's true. Well, I guess you do see it in New York too, though. I mean, when everywhere you look, really, when people are, and it's an economic thing, right? There's racial equality is economic equality, and I feel like people start to end up in their bubbles.
So I mean, like Los Angeles is like the perfect example.
Yeah.
So like in Los Angeles, it's hard to say as well what is self-segregation and what is economic segregation, because are they self-segregating based on choice, or are they self-segregating because financially these are the places that the system has put them?
Well, I think
and anyone.
When I said
in school, it is obvious.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that is a form of social construct based on those things.
That's
the
true.
economic standings, things like that. The fact that you feel more comfortable around like people.
Right.
Whereas if I can't claim this quote, and I'm going to butcher it and misquote it.
That's okay.
I don't even know who said it. But we shouldn't judge our country based on the state of the rich. We should judge our country based on the state of the poor.
And that's actually a really good point, because we always talk about the stock market's doing well.
Yeah, but it's doing well for 5 people.
Exactly. The unemployment rate is really low, but wages have not improved. Wages
cost of living has skyrocketed.
Exactly. So the fact that people can find jobs, that's great. But it's what kind of jobs? What was I think it was 2000.
Walmart employs like 75% of the United States,
and I think it was in 2009 was when minimum wage last went up.
Oh,
North Carolina, it's $7.25.
Yeah.
Whereas an apartment, and this actually leads me to a great point, because the next thing I want to talk to you about was gentrification, specifically of Charlotte. I know you've seen that. You can't avoid that.
Oh well, as somebody who's been gone for 9 years. Mm-hmm. There are areas that, like, I was told as a 16-year-old who just got my car never to go to.
Plaza Midwood.
That now, like, are the hippest happening spots in town.
Plaza Midwood. I lived in an apartment in Plaza Midwood called Metro 808.
Uh-huh.
And it's great, nice apartment.
Yeah.
A little pricey because it's Plaza Midwood. But someone one time told me, like, I bet you there are bodies buried underneath that building.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Plaza Midwood back in the day was not a nice area.
No.
And now it's a beautiful area, and that's fine.
I mean, yes and no.
Why yes and no?
It's fine because you're improving the quality of life for those people that live there.
Right.
But it's not fine because the people that live there are not the people that were born and raised there. And as you just said, in Charlotte, you can't move up.
Right.
So if you push these people out, you're not giving them a place that is comparable financially or a job that allows them to elevate themselves to the level that you have now just renovated this massive area of a city.
Right.
They have nowhere to go, or nowhere that they feel comfortable going.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about Charlotte is that all these areas, and it's not even just bad neighborhoods necessarily. It's all kinds of things because
totally.
One of the problems I have with Charlotte is that we lack culture as a city. There's no identity in Charlotte. Like all the music venues, like the Chop Shop, which used to be downtown.
Our identity is football and NASCAR.
Yeah, NASCAR and banks. If you are ever in Charlotte, I still suggest going down to Noda. Noda's a really cool place with some cool bars, cool little restaurants, tattoo places. But if you do go down there and you stand at a tattoo place called Foo's, which is where I got my latest dopest tattoo, it was a happy Father's Day gift, and you look straight down the street. I don't know the name of the street that you'd have to look down, but it's right.
It's North Davidson, I think.
Right? If you look straight down, the cross street. Yeah.
Okay.
If you look straight down, you'll see these huge apartment buildings. What used to be there was a place called the Chop Shop.
Yep, the Chop Shop.
Remember the Chop Shop?
Oh, I remember the Chop Shop.
Back in the day, we were in Slow Motion Riot, Miles and I.
I used to have to sneak in there because I was underage.
Yeah, and we used to play great shows. There was a great music venue, and they knocked it down. And they put up apartments.
Amos's is closed. I went to countless shows there.
Yep. All of them.
Tremont has closed.
Yep. Tremont was great. I played
there.
We played at Tremont as well. I love Tremont.
Tremont was great.
Tremont was one of my favorite places to play.
And what they don't realize is like that is robbing locals from having a cultural identity.
And
because what you're doing is you're promoting mainstream culture, and you're removing local culture.
It's like a Walmart, neighborhood Walmart.
Yeah, basically. I mean, the best information I ever got about gentrification was from a homeless man in Los Angeles. I was very open with knowing homeless people in Los Angeles. I always like to know my neighborhood homeless guy, because like he's the one that knows what's going down everywhere.
Yeah.
And he told me, he was like, if you want to watch gentrification, watch the trees. And I was like, what? He was like, watch where they plant new saplings, and by the time those trees are mature, there won't be a single person of color living there anymore.
At least not one that's not wearing a collared shirt.
Yeah, at least not one has been able to elevate themselves or comes from that. The areas that once were affordable and had local culture and local shops that you could only find in that neighborhood, one that was owned by your neighbor,
right,
or your landlord or your father, something that was a part of you emotionally.
Yeah.
Those are what are being lost.
Yeah.
We're losing trades as well because of that.
Yeah.
There used to be I remember in Huntersville, in the main strip, my whole life, there was a vacuum repair shop. Mm-hmm. Like, what?
Yeah.
How could it afford the rent?
Right.
Like, nowadays, that's the first question. Two, who gets a vacuum repaired? Now they just throw them away and buy a new one, because that's our mentality.
Yeah. That's consumerism.
Whereas my mom has a vacuum cleaner that's older than I am.
Yeah. Well, and you don't. I mean, that's just kind of our. We're so adverse to the notion of, like, Bernie Sanders has put forth people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this idea what they call democratic socialism, which, socialism's bad, capitalism builds wealth, but that's not true. That's not true. That, the United States, I recently read, and I can cite it later exactly, but there was, I don't know if it was the UN or whomever, they wanted to come into the United States and study poverty here.
Yeah.
There are parts of this country that are on par with third world countries in terms of poverty.
Go to Skid Row.
Yeah.
Go to Skid Row in Los Angeles. 30,000 homeless people in less than a square mile.
Jesus.
There are tents as far as the eye can see.
Jesus.
There are...
And it's not like... California's a rich state.
Oh, totally.
Lots of money in California.
I've watched Lamborghinis drive by tent farms. Like, it's insane. The inequality of wealth.
And again, you see it... I mean, you don't have to go as far as Los Angeles, people. You can see it right here.
You can go anywhere.
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, you can
literally
see it.
Charlotte.
You can see it anywhere.
Well, when we came down here, one of the jokes that we had was one of the big differences between, like, living in New York and living in Charlotte specifically was that in New York, you knew where the hood was, right? You knew where the bad parts of town were. In Charlotte, you can just accidentally fuck around, and all of a sudden you're knee deep in the ghetto and not know how you got there.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like in Plaza Midwood's a perfect example of that. There was a place, we lived in this big, beautiful apartment, Metro 808, but like we would walk to our buddy's house who lived like a mile away, maybe, and in between our apartment and our buddy's house, there was a gas station that my best friend, my roommate, got chased out of at knife point one time.
Yeah,
we used to call the stab and grab.
Same thing with Savannah, Georgia was the same way. I mean, even where me and your brother live in Charlotte now is considered unsafe, which I think is hilarious.
Right.
Where, like...
Well, Miles did say there's some hood activity that takes place there sometimes.
There definitely is, but at the same time, like, hood activity is American.
That's true. And hood
activity is American as shit.
Let's not get it twisted. I live in the suburbs, and there's hood activity that takes place here constantly. Like,
hood activity is part of life.
Right.
It's great.
That's
honestly,
true.
Like,
hood shit with our friends.
While I hate hood activity... In some ways, I saw...
Can't knock the hustle.
Yeah, no, you can't knock the hustle. One of the hardest I've laughed recently was I saw a meme that said, or it was like a Twitter exchange where a guy was like, "Yo, property values be going up. Don't know what to do about it. Can't afford rent." And then somebody else commented on it and was like, "Yeah, that's why I go outside and pop a few off in the air all the time."
To keep the value.
And I was like, that's so great.
Yeah,
like,
keep the value down.
I love that.
Every few hours.
Just go outside, pop a couple in the air. It keeps scared-ass white people.
So you're Southerner by birth. I'm a Southerner by association. Essentially, New Southerner. We see a lot of this. North Carolina went red in the election.
It did.
again, back to Trump, which and I feel like even this is a microcosm of that. It's unavoidable. Like everything that we talk about eventually now is going to come back to him. My question to you though is, from your experiences, who do you think is worse, Trump or his supporters?
I mean, supporters, because Trump wouldn't exist without supporters.
Right. Trump
is a figurehead for a belief system. Which is what's terrifying, is he's become a Batman. He is no longer a man. He is an idea.
A symbol, yeah.
Which is terrifying.
Which is interesting. And you're
like, if I wanted to be a vigilante, Trump would be my symbol, because nothing scares me more.
Well,
like when I did if I did the psychedelic plant thing with Liam Neeson coaching me,
right.
Trump would come out of the fucking box.
Well, why is that? Why? But again, you're saying that it's him though that you're more afraid of.
No, it's the idea that he has become.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, Trump doesn't believe in anything.
Right.
Trump is a mimic. He is a mime. He is a blank slate for which people can project themselves on. He even admitted to that in the 80s or 90s when in an interview he said, I would run Republican because they're too dumb.
Well, that wasn't, he didn't say that. That was disproven. He was attributed to saying that, but he didn't actually say that.
Okay, so there's some nice misinformation.
Yes, so
that was also
fake news. That was fake news.
Which is also a thing. It's so believable because he's a blank slate, because you don't know what he actually believes in.
That's absolutely true. That is true.
I will believe any headline about Trump because he's so wild, he's so unpredictable, and you have no idea what he actually thinks.
If someone told you that Barack Obama was like, I think Republicans are stupid, and that's why if I ran, I would be a Democrat.
I would never believe that, because you know
that.
his belief system.
Right,
you would honestly know it's fake news right away.
Right.
With Trump, there is no... We're in such a surreal Salvador Dali political landscape that, like, everything is melting and you don't know what to believe in anymore.
And I agree with you. I think, and I'm going to talk about this in the upcoming weeks, I've encountered, like, because of I've said this in the show before, because of doing this show, I engage a lot more in social media than I ever did. Like, my experience with social media before was just sharing pictures of the kids mostly, but now I actually go on social media, and I'm on Twitter, which I have never done up until this year, really. I had a Twitter account, but I never used it.
Nor have I. I've never been a Twitter.
Never twatter.
Never a twatter.
And and occasionally I try to engage with people on the right. I mean, because I'm interested, I'm fascinated by their perspective and how they can continue to support someone like that. That's what I don't get. I can understand hating Barack Obama because his beliefs don't line up with your beliefs. I can understand it at least in principle. I can understand being someone who claims to be fiscally conservative and socially liberal, although really what that means is that you just support the economic system that keeps...
You just support capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. I can get that, though. I can get that because at least there's some, like you said, guiding principle behind that. What I can't get is how people continuously support someone who completely lacks substance, who literally, like you said, doesn't stand for anything except for those, and they can't see that he's being propped up. And people, like, are quoting, like, have you heard of QAnon?
No.
So QAnon is like this vast internet conspiracy with all these different legs and all these different things. Like, apparently the number 17 is part of it. Like, Trump's signaling to these supporters.
Classic.
Yeah, it's all this bullshit. But people on the right, people who have been given voices on the right, are quoting this shit, and they're citing this shit, and they're using it as like proof or whatever. And that's the other thing. It's like the vacuum, right? So I noticed that people who are on the right, and people on the left do this too. I can't just say it's on the right, but I've noticed this, especially on the right. They'll quote like an op-ed from Fox News,
yeah,
and then they'll use that to cite as citation of their proof, and it's just perpetuating this like spin cycle of bullshit. And then they say that, and they get mad when fucking Colin Kaepernick is the face of Nike, start burning their shit, but we're the snowflakes. Like, I don't get it. You're white. Explain it to me.
Honestly, I think one of the biggest problems we're faced with right now in America, and this comes from somebody who's like really not that informed on our problems, but I do think one of the biggest problems is we've become a sensationalist nation.
Oh, of course.
All we care about is the sensation of reaction.
Yeah.
The sensation of hearing something and being like, I'm allowed to be angry because I'm an American, so I'm going to be angry.
The democratization of fury.
Without even really thinking about what you're angry about. Because if any of the right-wing people who've burned Nikes recently, to use the most recent sensation, if they actually did any research, they would realize that the CEO has donated millions of dollars to the GOP. Mm-hmm. They are one of the largest capitalist nation that Trump is probably helping.
Companies,
not nation, my bad. But basically
they could be a fucking nation.
Yeah,
the amount of money they have.
Nike could be a nation. They own sweatshops. They underplay. They have child workers.
They had no
underpay.
problem. They have no problem with little kids in Asia fucking working their hands off until they're bleeding.
Yeah. That's because it's out of sight, out of mind, man.
Yeah.
Who cares? If it's not my kid, fuck, I don't care.
Yeah. That's
the mentality, and it's really harmful that we can't see past that.
Yeah.
It's the same reason that the environment is in trouble. The same reason that.
But things like that now. But I'm gonna have to disagree with you slightly there because I feel like the environment being. I feel like Trump, and I'm not blaming everything. I never want to be one of those people who blames everything on Trump.
Okay, so Trump.
He's a symptom.
First of all, this is how I like to view it. Trump inherited a really bad chunk of land on a mountain that's just covered in snow, ready to fall at any minute into an avalanche, and he's just the dude that yelled.
Yeah. And the lot.
Yeah.
It's not falling. Yell at her.
He's the straw that broke the camel's back that's in denial that everything's falling right now.
So how does history judge this moment in time? How do you think?
Collapse of Rome. You
think so?
I think it's something along those lines. I mean, I don't think that I'm not egotistic enough to think that we are actually at the end. Mm-hmm. I don't think that we're that important. I think that we are in the middle of that story. Actually, this isn't the end of America. It's not that dramatic.
But America as we know it, maybe.
In some ways, I think this is the beginning of the end. I think this is where people are revealing a lot of their true identities, so things will come to a head. Either things will get drastically worse, or we'll be able to acknowledge things and constructively begin to work together towards some sort of semi-utopian.
Yeah.
Those are I think we've just come to the head where now we have to decide what route how do we actually
Utopian's a big word, though.
How do we want to define? That's why I said semi. Because we'll never be able to achieve a utopia unless we just off all of ourselves and let robots take over.
I agree with you that the supporters are a bigger problem because Trump, at some point, will be out of office.
Yeah.
At some point, he'll be out of office. But like you said, he's an idea. And this idea will always exist.
Yeah.
It won't go anywhere.
Now. I mean, not necessarily, because my hope is
it's always been there, though.
But that's the same concept as going to therapy. Mm-hmm. You go to therapy to realize what has always been there, but you haven't quite noticed. It's been under the surface. It's been affecting all your decisions. It's been affecting everything about your life. But you go to therapy to bring it to light, so then you can begin to work on it. And that's what I think. That's one of the few shining silver lights I'm hoping for, silver linings that comes out of this. You had
people like Ben Sass, I think he's from Nebraska or something, who's I think about leaving the Republican Party every day, and things like that. So there, and I'm not saying it's not a party thing. It's far beyond that. But I'm just saying that's something he's realizing that there's a different path.
Yeah. So this brings me to something that I've kind of been wanting to talk about, which is, I lived in Los Angeles, very liberal place.
Right.
On the most part, there are more companies there that are not liberal than anywhere else in the world, probably.
Right.
But as a populace, it is fairly liberal. It is a very diverse state. There are lots of types of people, and so one thing that I constantly heard when people found out I was from North Carolina, because one, I don't have a Southern accent, so it's not glaringly obvious that I'm from the South, is they would be like, "Oh man, how great do you feel that you escaped that?" And people would be like, "We should just cut the South off and let them be their own country." And I was always so offended and hurt because great people do come from here, from the South. We are not the ignorant rednecks, bumpkin hillbillies that a lot of the rest of the country thinks we are.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of I love Charlotte because I've been here for 14 years, so I feel like I'm from Charlotte. But I totally agree. Atlanta, Memphis, we have a lot of culture in the South, a lot of history in the South.
Yeah,
and you're absolutely right. Outside, everyone just thinks we drink sweet tea and fucking wave a Confederate flag around,
shoot shotguns, and do nothing else, and just collect unemployment checks.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all we do.
Yeah,
and it was super. I think that is one of the most destructive mindsets in America right now about this problem, which is we have all these right-wing people, and it's not just the South, it's everywhere. New York, the Midwest, and the ones that scare me the most are really, really well-educated, higher learned, conservatives. Those are the most terrifying to me.
Why do you say that?
Because you've had the privilege of more than likely experiencing more than your immediate surroundings, and that didn't affect you. Which to me means you're a sociopath and have no empathy.
Speaking of sociopaths, let's transition because we're running out of time, and I do a pop-up top 5.
Pop-up top 5.
Pop-up top 5, and that's where we're at. I'm gonna add like a sound pop-up, something like that. But speaking of sociopaths, you and I are both big Batman fans.
We are huge Batman
Batman
fans.
is a sociopath.
Batman is totally a sociopath.
What are your 5 favorite Batman stories?
5 favorite Batman stories?
Yes.
Batman...
And it could not just comic, it could be the movie, it could be even an episode
well,
of
my
the show.
first one I was going to was Batman the Animated Series.
Okay. The whole thing?
No. So this is like probably my number 1.
Okay.
My number 1 Batman story, honestly, is the Almost Got Him episode. Where all of the villains are sitting around playing poker and they tell their stories where they almost caught Batman.
Okay.
And I love that episode.
Yeah.
I just think it builds the world out so much, and it shows you that these villains are just kind of normal people who just want to do their crazy stuff and let Batman leave them alone.
Yeah.
Batman would probably be a Trump supporter. Which is...
You think so?
Bruce Wayne? I think Bruce Wayne would.
I feel like Bruce Wayne is like conscious enough socially, though. He knows like about like the bad part, like that people need help.
It all
like,
depends which Batman,
That's
which
true.
Bruce Wayne you're looking at.
That is true.
I mean, Bruce Wayne, how committed is he to his cover? How committed is he to... Because, like, let's be honest, this has been talked about before on the internet. Bruce Wayne could solve all of the economic crisis with
easily.
With
the crime.
With his Wayne fortune.
And the crime, he could give all of his... If he just helped out the police department, there would be no crime in Gotham, which is the most crime-ridden city on Earth.
Just reproduce 5 of your gadgets.
It's funny because...
Bruce Wayne could make a effective enough non-lethal weapon because he doesn't kill people.
Right.
The entire police force of the United States could be no longer non-lethal.
It's funny we were talking about this too because if you think about it, have you read the Batman White Knight?
I have not yet.
I have the whole thing if you want to borrow it.
It's fantastic.
But they have essentially the same premise as the Lego movie.
Where
they're like, why don't you work with the police? Like, and they're like, I don't know, I don't work alone. Like, it's the same thing. It's just hilarious.
Because at the end, he is a sociopath who this is still all a vendetta.
Right. Okay, so what's number 2?
Number 2, just for comedy purposes, I'm not wearing hockey pads. That line has brought me infinite amount of joy in my life.
But I'm not wearing hockey pads. Is that your number 2 favorite story, though? Dark Knight?
Okay, so actual storylines?
Yeah, storylines. So we went with the Gotham episode for
Gotham
number 1.
episode is great. Storylines, I mean, The Dark Knight is just such a fantastic...
I agree.
I mean, in terms of actual favorite adaptations, it's up there.
Yeah.
Joey's gonna kill me. Joey Rivera. He was on episode
Pursued by
1.
a Bear, shout out.
He's gonna kill me that I don't know the name of this episode. It's a 2-parter in the animated series, and it's like Shadow of the Ninja or something like that. And it is one of the greatest episode story arcs ever. It's when he goes to Japan.
I remember that one.
You learn about some of his training background.
Yeah.
He fights in a volcano.
Yes. Is it Ra's al Ghul he fights against?
No, it's one of the ninjas.
The ninjas.
Ra's al Ghul he does deal with in that series.
I remember that. And
it's been a long time.
in that one?
Yeah, Natalia's in that one and all that stuff. And it's been a long time.
What? Okay, so are we at 3 now?
I think that was 3. Dark Knight and
we're gonna go with Gotham, Dark Knight, and then Shadow of a Ninja.
Yeah, the 2-part.
Okay, are we gonna throw any? We got 2 more. Any comics on there?
Any comics? I mean, Killing Joke.
Yeah, Killing Joke's fantastic.
Killing Joke. I refuse to watch the movie.
I've heard it was terrible.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but bad things. So I refuse to watch the movie because that comic book... I read it when I was way too young.
As is sometimes the case.
My mom bought it for me thinking that comic books can't be for anything but kids. Not knowing that comic books are a serious art form and discuss serious matters. And that the Joker snaps his own neck, or Batman snaps his own. He also,
neck? I mean, it starts. He shoots Barbara Gordon and paralyzes
her.
Like that's.
It's a very, very heavy story,
and only to prove a point of chaos.
Yeah,
like that. Any one bad day can turn anyone can. And that's his whole point is just to make Jim Gordon go nuts, which is insane.
And then probably lastly, just because it was such a cool thing to be alive and buying weekly, was the Court of Owls.
Oh, Court of Owls was very good.
Court of Owls was.
Very good.
I felt very privileged to be alive and buying that weekly. It was one of the more fun rides in comic books I've had, and one of the better reinventions of a character.
I was going to say, I liked how it kind of subverted without subverting completely. Like it.
To me, it's how I talk about the very first opening of the Michael Keaton Batman, where you see Batman stop the scenario he had when he was a child. You get the origin story where you watch a mugger mug this family in an alley, but then it spins it on its head and Batman saves them. When the whole time you're watching that opening sequence, you think that it's the origin story.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you lost me for a second, but I know what you're...
You know that scene now? Yeah, where you're watching this family get mugged and you think it's Bruce Wayne.
And then Batman scoops in
exactly.
and it's not... Yeah, it's
and
like
I always loved that because it just
hand.
subverts your... Because everybody knows these origin stories so well.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, how many comic book movies have we had? How many versions of all of these things?
Yeah, and I'm still going to buy Spider-Man.
Oh, I've been playing it for the past 3 days.
Is it dope?
It's magic.
Yeah.
Just movement is great.
I can't wait.
But it's one of these things where like we are so expecting these same stories that when you actually get something that subverts your expectations.
But even that's like slight because even the comics tell the same stories over and over and over again. Like especially Marvel's the worst. How many times is the Phoenix going to show up?
Oh, I mean, so speaking of Spider-Man game, I'm not very far in it, but early on you play as MJ, and you're just walking around looking at Fisk's estate, because there's an estate sale since he got arrested. And you're looking at all these artifacts. And one of my favorite moments that like actually made me pause and be like, man, this is why I love comic books and I love these, is they really make you think about important issues, was she stopped and looked at a samurai suit of armor, and she goes, sometimes I just think that all of history is men playing dress up and fighting. And I was like, wow. Like, what a great look inside of the mind of a very famous character.
Female character.
Who has now, in my opinion, one of the most realistic and lucid views of that world.
Yeah. That's
like,
interesting.
Oh, we live in a world of mass superheroes and supervillains. And she looks at it as, how is it any different than all of history?
Yeah.
How is that any different? And I thought that was so interesting and so counter what I thought, how I thought about comic books and superheroes. In that one little short throwaway line in a video game, it made me be like, wow, I never thought about that. That like, that's exactly what was happening in the ages of Rome. That's exactly what was happening with samurais and that kind of stuff. Conquistadors, Egyptians.
Yeah. It's
all about just men wearing masks and fighting.
That's funny. All right, buddy. Well, we've been talking for almost an hour.
Classic.
And we probably could continue to go, but I would like for people to continue.
Yeah, for the listeners' sake.
Yeah. So thank you for coming to the Native Wild Studios.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And for those of you who are out there listening, please continue to do so. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you think about our show. You want people to check you out on Instagram?
Yeah, so if you ever are interested in seeing any of my illustrations and or weird thoughts, my Instagram is at Mike Jenki, Mike and then Jenki.
That's at Mike Jenki. I don't know why I'm writing that down.
It's basically just a public journal for all the world to see what's going on in my brain.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we out the wild. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you later. One love.
Volume 1.
of them, and they arrested us. And